you've got to hand it to Sky News at every opportunity to be able to slander Albanese. They will to cause some diversion, to cause discontent, to cause diversiveness. That is exactly what Sky News do, and they do it with enthusiasm, with a great sense of dedication and dishonesty. It's who Sky News are. And I'm here to report on the way they behave and how disingenuous they actually are. And why I even call them a news outlet, I'll never know, because they're a propagandist for the Liberal National Party and also for anybody that sits on the right wing of politics. You just need to see the people that they interview. But there is this article that came out in the skysnews.com.au which I think just highlights where they're coming from in the most profound way, because it is here that they talk about Albanese in the past and some of the things that he made, or the comments that he made about Donald Trump back when Donald Trump was standing for the President of the United States the first time around. And so, of course, they were in opposition, and that is, Albanese was in opposition, and of course was in a position to criticise, which is what oppositions do, I guess. So I just want to show you this article because I find it interesting the way they choose to talk about this. So the headline is Labor's worst anti-Trump attacks exposed as US alliance in jeopardy. Now, I just want to highlight the fact that it isn't like this information had been hidden. It isn't like someone had tried to hide's the only word I can think of. Someone hasn't tried to dismiss or to bury or to erase, I guess, from the media anything that Albanese and Jason Clare and others might have said in the Labor Party at a time when they were critical of Donald Trump. This is open to the public. Anybody could have found it if you just looked. But for Sky News, it is clearly a revelation. So skynews.com.au has uncovered the worst post they've uncovered. The worst post made by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and his most senior ministers about US President Donald Trump, which experts warn have sabotaged relationships and plunged Australia into diplomatic crisis. That is totally untrue. Skynews.com.au has uncovered the worst post made by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and his senior ministers about US President Donald Trump, which experts warn have sabotaged relationships and plunged Australia into diplomatic crisis. Well, Australia isn't in diplomatic crisis over any of this. And who are these experts that you're talking about? So experts warn that this is sabotage. Well, you know, does Donald Trump really care about what other people say? I mean, you look at Marco Rubio, and Rubio has said some terrible things about Donald Trump. J.D. Vance said some things about Donald Trump, and he happens to be the vice president. So who knows whether this has any great meaning to Trump? Probably not. If you just talk around and suck up to him enough times, he will then acquiesce and give in to you because you'll think you're a great person as long as you're saying something positive about him. So it goes on to say at least a dozen senior ministers have publicly attacked Donald Trump on social media, with some politicians describing him as a threat to democracy and a liar. And I just want to say that it is true. He is a threat to democracy, and there's no doubt about the fact that the man is a habitual liar. That is without question, in fact. In posts from 2021, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese called on the former Morrison government to publicly condemn Trump and accuse him of inciting violence. Foreign Affairs Minister Penny Wong, whose role involves dealing with the Trump administration, alleged that he had incited violence and that he was bad for allies. Attacks range from allegations Trump was stoking fear and rage to engaging in anti-democratic actions, while in one childish criticism, and one has to say, when you think of them using the term that the attacks from the Albanese in opposition were childish, and then you look at the comments made by Trump about the people he chooses to dislike, and you can't help but call them childish. The hypocrisy here just is amazing. Attacks range from Trump was stoking fear and rage to engaging in anti-democratic actions, while in one childish criticism, senior minister mocked him as a liar who wore a toupee. Well, maybe that is the case. Both of them, liar and a toupee. The Labor politicians made the comments on social media at a time when it appeared unlikely that the US president will return for a second term. But experts have since said the White House would be acutely aware of social media rhetoric and warned it has destabilised relations. Now, this is all assumption. No one knows whether it's destabilised relations. As I've often said before, the reality is that Donald Trump would have trouble finding Australia on a map. Doesn't care one iota about who we are. Neither would he care all that much about anything that we've said. So they go on to say, just to bore you even further, read the social media post that could undermine the alliance. Labor figures holding some of the most senior roles in government, including Mr. Albanese, used their time in opposition to launch scathing attacks on President Trump, and rightfully so. And my point, which I keep coming back to, is that those attacks were justified at the time, given who Trump is. And now is the time you don't necessarily have to repeat those scathing comments, but you can sit by your values and principles that you were exhibiting way back in 2020, 21, whenever it might have been. The criticisms that you had of Trump still apply today. I guess the ball game's slightly different when you're in government, but nevertheless, the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, the responses to Trump are pretty much the same today as they would have been back then. Now, the ministers often accused the US president of anti-democratic behaviour and aligned him with the far right of politics, lightning coalition leader to him as an insult. So to say that he was reflects the coalition was an insult. Mr. Albanese, while opposition leader in 2021, accused President Trump of anti-democratic actions, peddling nonsense and encouraging violent insurrections. And that is true. That's exactly what Trump has done. So the article goes on with a whole host of other examples of people within government, the government today, making comments about Donald Trump. And so what they're doing is they're trying to find a way to divide the nation. Firstly, selling you disinformation in that what was said about, so you've got to see it in the light of how Trump would respond. So you can say nasty things about Trump, as I said, plenty of examples about that, and then you just suck up to him, tell him he's the greatest person on earth, as happened at NATO a couple of weeks ago, and suddenly you're on his best side. It would be sickening, absolutely sickening, to see the government do that these days, to find ways to suck up to him. And this is why the speech that I talked about in the previous post was so important by Albanese on Saturday, because it did talk about the differences that we need to discover between us and the United States and find ways to care for ourselves, look after our own region, as opposed to depending on the United States. And you can see the government moving further and further away from that. And one of the reasons why they would be moving further away was simply because they can no longer rely, and as is the case around the world, we can't rely on the United States to help us. So let me know what you think in the comment sections below. Do you take note of things that Sky News say? Who does? Clearly some people must. They have quite a following, as it turned out. But, on the other hand, will they have traction from all of this? That's the issue. and that's what I really want to talk about now, is whether or not anything that the right-wing media say has traction, and whether the allegiance towards Donald Trump is something that is likely to manifest us here in Australia, I think is an interesting issue. We know that 72% of Australians don't like Trump, don't like Trumpism, so why flog the dead horse? I will never know. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comment sections below. In the meantime, take care, look after yourselves, and more importantly, be safe.